I think more than anything, the idea that you had a whole lot of people from every conceivable different background, racial, ethnic, from different socioeconomic groups who came together in the face of real adversity, to survive. And, and this coming together of people from all walks of life, the resilience that they showed in first being able to get through the attacks, but then thereafter, the staff and everyone behind the Taj Hotel opening the first restaurant within 3 weeks of these devastating attacks, and then restoring the hotel completely to its former glory within 21 months, is, as Dev said yesterday, it's an anthem of resistance.
And I think they made it a point, chef, I spoke to the real Chef Oberoi yesterday, and he said, we sent a message out by getting it running within 3 weeks, the restaurants again. And they really want to put that in the past and show that this hasn't crippled the Taj in any way. There is a monument when you go in there to all the victims of the Taj, and you see that, and makes you a little emotional. And I haven't stayed in that hotel, but I've stayed in another Taj in Mumbai. I've spoken to some of the staff that work there. Actually, there's a Sikh waiter that I spoke to, and it's a very delicate subject. It's still very raw for a lot of the people there.
We had a group meal at the Taj, and I remember distinctly that the lights went out, but something happened, and the waiters came up to us, and they apologized profusely like 16 times. And I remember thinking, wow, everything that Anthony portrayed in this film as far as the respect for guests and the constant care for guests is based on reality.
It's easy to get distracted because it's such an iconic place and it means so much in India. But I suspect, and you can contradict me if you like, guys, but that the reason you were drawn to tell the story is that there's something very universal. We're told often that we should be, we're divided by race, by income. There's a bunch of stuff. There are people in the highest offices on the planet telling us that essentially we're all selfish, venal characters. But in this situation, this real-life situation, when the most catastrophic thing, existential threat that could happen, happened to a bunch of people, those divides evaporated immediately. So it's less about the hotel, with respect to the hotel, than it is about who we are as human beings. And it could have happened in many other situations too. I think it's an essential truth about who we are.
So they thought the whole city was under siege, like no one knew what was happening. And, we obviously focused on the Taj itself because that was their primary target. But this was definitely something that was felt by everyone that lived in this, this mega city of 20+ million people.
And the amazing thing about it, the highest aspiration of storytelling, is not only that it's completely engaging, but they were dying to talk about it. They wanted to talk about choices, what it showed them about human beings. They wanted to know which bits were true, and so I think it works in any environment. It is true, though, that I hope people see it on a screen with other people, because what it does is connect you with other people and recognize your common humanity. Watch it by yourself. It's not quite the same thing. It's why we all love cinema.
The the dance at the end of Slumdog, it was kind of an addition whilst we were filming, and Danny had visited VT Station, and he was just so overwhelmed by in every corner there was life. There's just people, going somewhere, coming back from somewhere, meeting families, all sorts of, people traveling, going somewhere. And so we decided to... there you go.
That's all right, go for it.
But, yeah, who is it? But so he added this dance sequence at the end of the film as kind of like an ode to India and its cinema. And as much as I hated it, doing it, it kind of encapsulated this movie. And then, to come back off this amazing journey and then, enter my house in London and see my parents looking at the screen, watching the city essentially burn, it was very difficult. And what happened there was, these teenagers, these young guys walked out onto these platforms with automatic guns, and they did catastrophic damage, and mowed down 50 people and injured over 100 or something like that. And the police were underarmed, most of their rifles were old, centuries old, and it's like a single bullet in there. And it's horrible what happened there. There was a synagogue. There were so many places that were attacked. So, when there was a film being made, I felt very compelled to, seek it out and want to be a part of it. And what started off as like a general meeting, 7 hours later and 100 cups of coffee, and we just turned into this massive like character script session type thing. And the film had so many beautiful brushstrokes and so many amazing characters. For me personally, just as an actor, I wanted to do more with the character of Ojan, and say more, essentially. And I thought, I read these articles about these Sikh cab drivers in New York being targeted and attacked after September 11th, and being labeled terrorists. And I thought, wow, this is we could make this man a Sikh man. Not only are they very, it's a community that's supremely underrepresented in cinema, but in the four walls of this hotel where people are turning on each other and pressures are running high and panics in the air, you get the scene that Jason was talking about where you can break down a stereotype and educate the audience on a culture.
The main element of attraction in this film for me was Anthony. Getting to work with him. He and John had such an incredible script, and then I saw a short film that he made called The Palace, and it was the most intense 12 or 15 minutes that I've ever had in my entire life. I had to pause the movie at one point and get up and walk around my room and just be like, okay, so this is the movie, just finish the movie. And after seeing what he did with that and reading the amazing script that they had, I just knew that he was the only person who really could direct something like this. And I also really responded to the display of sort of the indomitable human spirit. And to go back to what everybody else said, you have an incredibly varied group of people from all different walks of life. And to see what they were able to overcome and the adversities that they were able to surmount, and not only that, survive. It's an incredible story, and I also really liked that the people inflicting the terror, the gunmen in the movie, were not two-dimensional, faceless instruments of evil, just wielding guns and causing havoc. They were people. They were kids, and in a way, they were kids who were tricked, kind of, into doing this. Whether it was they were promised money or surgeries for their family or whatever. They were convinced and indoctrinated and brainwashed into doing this heinous act of terror. And you see, I can't think of another film where this happens, but in this film specifically, you see the toll that the attack has on the guests and the staff of the hotel, but you also see it really for the first time that I can think of on the actual perpetrators. You see what these kids go through when they're having to do this, and how their beliefs are shaken, and how their sort of resiliency is shaken. It just seemed like the script was just dripping in humanity all over the place, and I thought it was just a beautiful, beautiful story, and I knew after watching The Palace that Anthony was going to do a great job with it.
There were 10 gunmen that were involved in these attacks. 9 of them were killed by the security forces, but 1 lived, Ajmal Kasab. And he had a trial that went on for a long time. There were thousands of pages of transcripts. There's a video confession that he made in his bedside. And that, together with these satellite phone interceptions, allowed a real immediate insight into what was going through their minds at the time, but also where they came from. And you got to understand, there were 10 gunmen who went to Mumbai on that day, but there were over 100 that were initially recruited by the terrorist organization that did this up in the highlands of tribal Pakistan. And they whittled it down from 100 to 50 to 30 to 10, not just who would be the best tactical fighters or gunmen, terrorists, whatever you want to call them, but who could take orders best, who they could rely on to follow through, who were the most easily who they were most easily able to convince to commit these things and keep keep it up.
It was such an intense film to make that we, for the first time in my 30-odd years of filmmaking, I was in a group of people who didn't want to say goodbye when we wrapped at the night and go home. But we continued to spend the rest of the days and nights together, so we went out to eat. And somehow we needed to either let off steam or stay in each other's company. But it actually felt like there were many certain different permutations, but I certainly got to do scenes with all of you. There were some scenes where people Tilly, you were by yourself in the bedroom more than the rest of
I
us, weren't
was quite by myself. Well, I had a beautiful
with the
six-month-old
baby,
baby with me the
yeah.
whole time, so that was great company. But I thought about that a lot as well, and I think the communal passion we all had for the story as well. I was thinking about this yesterday, and it sort of almost felt like we were on a relay race together, and each day you'd sort of pass this delicate story to the next person. Like, it felt we were very together on telling a whole lot of disparate stories.
I think as people, as actors, we met in the daytime, but the bonding happened in the evening. Because I think it was very important, it was less acting, more of personal bonding, which sort of had to be displayed on screen for us to emotionally hold our hands together, because what we were going through during the day with Anthony was very traumatic, because we could not depend on acting only, we had to actually feel it. And then Anthony, in his great style, used to have this sound recording of bullets going on actually, and we will actually go through that trauma. And in the evening, we used to meet every evening in the lobby. And at any cost, we'll have to spend some time together. And I will say that not only this film has given me a great role and a great film, but given me an extended family for the rest of my life. And that makes me feel a rich person.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice.
Hey